What would you do if the person you were sent to destroy turned out to be the only one who ever truly saw you? And this story shows that the wait for real love, no matter how painful the road, can be recompensed in ways you never imagined. The deposition was supposed to take 40 minutes. Margaret Hale had done hundreds of them, and she had learned early in her career at Caldwell and Price that 40 minutes was the outer limit of anyone's patience before the masks began to slip. She walked into the conference room on the 32nd floor of the Daily Center building that January morning in 1993 with 2 yellow legal pads, a recorder, and the absolute certainty that Daniel Voss was a fraud. He was already seated when she arrived. She had expected arrogance, the particular kind that came with men who built companies from scratch and convinced themselves the rules had been written for someone else. What she had not expected was the way he looked up from the window, the gray Chicago skyline behind him, and said simply, "I know why you are here, and I understand." She sat down without responding. She pressed record. Daniel Voss was 38 years old and had founded Meridian Construction 6 years earlier with a loan from his mother and a reputation for completing projects other contractors refused. His company had built 3 affordable housing developments on the South Side, and now the city of Chicago was accusing him of diverting federal funds, falsifying completion reports, and bribing a zoning inspector named Ferris. Margaret's firm had been retained by the city. She had 400 pages of documentation and a timeline that looked airtight. But 40 minutes became 3 hours. He answered every question without deflection, without the practiced evasion she had learned to detect in the pauses between syllables. When she pushed, he pushed back, not with hostility but with precision, pointing to documents she had seen but not fully read, dates she had accepted without verification. At one point he slid a folder across the table and said, "I think you will want to look at page 11. She looked. She kept her face still. She drove home that night in the sleet and sat in her parked car in front of her apartment building on Dearborn for a long time before going inside. Margaret had built her entire professional identity on being the person who finished things. She had grown up the daughter of a high school librarian in Evanston who clipped grocery coupons and ironed her work blouses the night before, and she had understood before she was 12 that the distance between her life and a different kind of life was made entirely of sustained effort. She had graduated top of her class at Northwestern Law. She had never lost a case she truly believed in. The problem was beginning to form in the back of her mind like a crack in cold pavement, slow and widening. She was no longer certain she believed in this one. The depositions continued twice a week through February. She told herself she was being thorough. She told herself the additional sessions were procedurally justified. Her supervising partner, a compact, efficient man named Aldridge, asked once why the case was taking so long, and she said the defendant was unusually organized, which was true, and said nothing else. Daniel brought coffee the 3rd week. He set a cup beside her recorder without comment, and she did not thank him and did not drink it until he looked away, and then she drank half of it in one long pull because she had been awake since 5. She learned things about him the way she learned everything, through documentation first and then inference. He had grown up in Pilsen. His father had died on a construction site when Daniel was 9, a scaffolding failure, a contractor who had cut corners on safety equipment. He had never spoken about it in interviews. She found it in an old neighborhood newspaper profile from 1988, 2 paragraphs buried near the end. She read it 3 times and then filed it in a folder she labeled background only and did not discuss it with Aldridge. In the 4th week she asked him, during a break, why he had chosen construction. He looked at her for a moment, as if deciding something. Then he said, "Because I wanted to build things that held." She wrote nothing down. It was the end of March when she found the Ferris payment records, the ones her own team had flagged as evidence of bribery. She had looked at them before and accepted the interpretation without digging further because the timeline fit, and because Aldridge had said it was clean. But she pulled the originals again on a Tuesday night alone in the office, and she went backward, transaction by transaction, and she found something that should not have been there: a second set of city records, filed 6 weeks before the payments in question, showing that Ferris had already signed off on the zoning variance before any money had changed hands. The payment had not purchased the approval. The approval had already been granted. The payment was something else, and she stayed at her desk until midnight reading everything again from the beginning, and by the time she turned off her lamp she understood that the case the city had built was not a case. It was a story told backward from a conclusion someone had already chosen. She did not sleep. The near separation came not from a misunderstanding between them but from the structure of the world they were both inside. Margaret went to Aldridge the next morning and laid out what she had found. She was careful and precise, and she watched his face close in the way faces close when a problem becomes inconvenient. He told her the interpretation was defensible. He told her the city needed this case to go forward for reasons that extended beyond the specifics of the documentation. He told her she was young and that her judgment, while admirable, was perhaps insufficiently calibrated to the political realities of municipal litigation. She understood in that moment that she was being asked to be a different kind of lawyer than she had believed herself to be. She called Daniel that evening from a pay phone 2 blocks from her office, standing in the cold with her coat open because she had left the building without stopping to button it. She told him she needed to speak with him outside of any formal proceeding. He said, "I know. Tell me where." They met at a diner on Michigan Avenue that was nearly empty on a Wednesday night. She laid the documents on the table, and she explained what she had found, slowly and without drama, because the facts were dramatic enough on their own. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he looked at the papers for a long moment, and then looked at her and said, "You are telling me you are going to blow up your own case." She said, "I am telling you the case should not exist." He said, "This will cost you your position at the firm." She said, "I know." He said nothing for a moment. Then he said, "Margaret." "Why?" And she said, "Because you built things that held, and somebody tried to tear them down, and I am not going to be the instrument of that." What she did not say, because she did not have the language for it yet, was that somewhere in those long depositions across a conference room table, watching him refuse to become small under pressure, she had understood something about the kind of person she wanted to be, and that it was the same kind of person he already was. She filed the supplemental disclosure with the court the following Monday morning. Aldridge accepted her resignation before noon. She cleaned out her office in 40 minutes, which she noted with a bleak private humor, and she walked out of the Caldwell and Price building into a cold April afternoon carrying a banker's box and her 2 yellow legal pads. The case against Daniel Voss was dismissed 6 weeks later when the city declined to proceed in the face of the corrected record. An internal investigation into how the original documentation had been assembled was quietly initiated, and then, less quietly, it led to the resignation of a deputy commissioner whose relationship with Ferris turned out to be considerably more complex than anyone had acknowledged. Margaret spent those 6 weeks doing contract work for a small firm in Wicker Park that handled tenant disputes and labor grievances. She was not miserable. She was, for the first time in years, not performing the person she was supposed to be. Daniel called her on a Saturday in May. He asked if she would have coffee with him, and she said yes without pretending to think about it. They sat outside at a table on the sidewalk because the weather had finally broken and the city was doing what it did in the first real warmth of spring, opening itself up, people moving differently, slower and more willing to be present. He told her that Meridian had been awarded a new contract, a school renovation in Bronzeville. He told her he had been approached by a community development nonprofit that wanted him on their board. He told her that his mother had cried when the case was dismissed, which was the first time he had mentioned his mother, and she understood it as a form of trust. She told him she had taken a job offer from the tenant firm. Permanent. She told him the salary was a third of what she had made before, and he said, "Are you all right with that?" And she said, "I think I am actually, for the first time, practicing law." He reached across the table and put his hand over hers and left it there. The hard thing about being honest with yourself, she had learned, was that it required you to stop moving long enough to hear what you actually thought. She had spent 11 years in motion. She looked at his hand on hers and at the street, and at the light coming off the glass buildings, and she thought, this is what I was moving toward without knowing it. They were married the following January, in a small ceremony at a restaurant in Pilsen that his mother had helped choose. Margaret's mother came from Evanston and wore her good blue dress and cried twice. Once during the vows and once when Daniel gave a toast about the document on page 11 of a folder, and the attorney who had actually read it. Margaret opened her own practice this spring after their wedding. She took cases other firms found inconvenient, and she was good at it, better than she had been before, because she was no longer afraid of the conclusion. Daniel's company completed the Bronzeville School on schedule and under budget, and at the ribbon cutting a city councilwoman shook his hand and said she had heard about him, and he said quietly that he hoped that was a recent development. On the night after the ribbon cutting they sat on the steps of their house in Ukrainian village, and she leaned against him, and he put his arm around her, and the city went on doing what cities do, indifferent and luminous. And she thought about a conference room in January and a cup of coffee she had almost not drunk in the 40 minutes that became the rest of her life. Did you enjoy today's story? Stay with me for just a moment. Let me know in the comments, which city are you watching from? Did this message touch you? And if you have ideas for future stories, feel free to share them. Your suggestion could become our next video. Leave a like if this message meant something to you. Subscribe so you don't miss the next videos. If you think someone else would appreciate this message, please share it. And if you'd like to support the channel, take a look at the links in the description. Some are affiliate links, which help us at no extra cost to you. Thank you for being here. See you in the next video.